EAGLES, Eagles.
Good morning, Eagles fans. Welcome into a Wednesday edition of Birds 365, July 17th here, and we are just 6 days away from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp. Summer moved right along, and here we are inside a week now until our Philadelphia Eagles are back on the field, back at practice. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, man?
Doing well. Yeah, a week away. Rumor has it anyway. Week away from first practice. We'll see what time that is, but it'll be in the morning. We know that.
It'll be in the morning. So pending Birds 365 schedule, we will figure that out. As soon as we get this schedule, we're going to figure it out, and we will let all of you guys know how that goes. Good show planned today. We got two good guests. We got Mike Gill in hour number one, as we always do on Wednesday, and then in hour number two, Brandon Leak out, and as we always do in hour number two on Wednesday. So two good guests, and we will continue our training camp previews as we have gone down the list. We did all the offensive side of the ball yesterday. We started with the edge rushers on Monday, and then we did interior of the D-line yesterday, which was a very good segment. And then now here we are, Johnny Mac, at the off-ball linebacker. Tough one to talk about when you look at it on paper. Vic Fangio has been anointed, John, as like the second coming to try and save this defense, and everybody is putting every problem of the defense on Vic Fangio. Oh, Vic will figure it out. Oh, we got Vic Fangio. It's okay. Oh, it doesn't matter. We don't have linebackers. Oh, it doesn't matter whether Nakobe Dean's good. Vic will figure it out. Take us through the off-ball linebacker as we prepare.
Yeah, I mean, I joked about that in my preview at SI.com. People could point it out. If there's one position where it's, Vic will figure it out, this is certainly it. And how he's spoken in the past about hope not being a strategy on more than one occasions. Well, yeah, it seems like the Eagles are crossing their fingers on a bunch of linebackers. So a cynic might point to that and say, except for all-ball linebacker, hope is not a strategy. Yeah, it ain't good on paper. Almost to the point, though, that you say it's got to be better than it looks. So there's some positive there, and I've said one of the other positives is I don't think you have to worry about injuries that much because the first team is not that much better than the third team, to be honest. Bunch of revolving door players. As you get to the third team, then you start talking about developmental players, Ben VanSumeren. But, I was kind of impressed with Ben last year when he got thrown into the fire. Very short period. Very athletic, very raw player. He's somebody to keep an eye on from the standpoint of, look, if he plays well over the summer, you want to keep him over the Oren Burkses of the world or even some of the other, dare I say, one-year contract players. And Jeremiah Trotter Jr. obviously is going to be a name very popular locally for the obvious reasons, but I think that's going to be more about 2025 and beyond. For this year, it's Nakobe's got to be better, got to be healthy, and when he's on the field, better, because in the short period of time he was on the field, he wasn't that good, to be honest. So he's got to prove it on both fronts, that he can stay on the field and that he can be impactful. And then Devin White, we've talked about a lot in the offseason. People hold on to those pedigree titles like grim death. It's the number 5 overall pick in the draft. And they fast forward 5 years, and he was the number 5 overall pick in the draft, and ignore the 5 years that have gone on in between that. But he's athletic. So cross your fingers. And then Zach Bond. He played with Andrew Van Ginkel, how he brought up Andrew Van Ginkel's name. And, all of a sudden he shows up and Vic says, no, he's an off-ball linebacker, and maybe he's trying to toggle him back and forth and try to create that type of presence on the defense, but signed a 1-year deal for the veteran minimum with some incentives. Sounds like a lot of crossing of the fingers to me.
Tons of crossing of the fingers at the linebacker position. There's just no other way to slice it. We're gonna see. My bullseye here is on Nakobe Dean. I need Nakobe Dean to step up. And to be honest, John, my faith in Nakobe Dean is low. It's low as an Eagle fan. I mean, I've heard what you have said all offseason about Devin White and why you have concerns and why you can't anoint this guy as a great linebacker because of his pedigree. I have more faith that he has a better year this year than Nakobe Dean. I really do.
Well, you're not the only one. I would say more people.
And I don't. But when I say that, I don't mean it in a biased way in terms of Devin White's going to be great. I don't think he's going to be great either. But I'm just at the point at Nakobe Dean where you either need to stay on the field and be productive, or we need to move on to the next, toy on the island of misfit toys at linebacker.
Yeah, well, and Howie, this tends to be a sore spot for Howie when it's brought up to him, and the obvious devaluing of the position. I don't know how you can argue it. His argument seems to be, well, when we go to the Super Bowl, we have good linebacker play, which is true, which maybe should change your philosophy.
Yeah, right.
If you go back to Super Bowl 52 when they won it, you had Jordan Hicks, who was a high pick, a 3rd-round pick, a premium pick, turned into a very good player, had some injury issues, obviously, which ironically he seemed to cure when he left Philadelphia until last season when he had a really, scary injury, but I digress. He's in Cleveland with Jim Schwartz now. But he got injured in the Super Bowl season, as he typically did. Nigel Bradham had to move over, and Nigel was a relatively cost-effective free agent signing, but he was a real free agent signing. Multiple years,
right?
Decent money, not crazy, but it showed a little bit. And then if you fast forward to Super Bowl 57 and you start talking about TJ Edwards developing and Kaiser White having a competent year, again, there was more impact put on the position as far as developmental. Now you got lucky. Then when it came time to pay him, you didn't want to pay him. And, Kaiser White got a very cost-effective 2-year deal out in Arizona. The Eagles wanted no part of it because it was 2 years. So you can't have it both ways and say, oh, when we've made the Super Bowl, we've had good linebacker play, and then you don't pay those linebackers.
Look, I think they're holding on to this hope in Nakobe Dean because Bill brought that up when they're like, oh, you've devalued the position. And, Howie brought up, well, we did spend a 3rd-round pick on Nakobe Dean. So I guess they're holding out hope. I want to welcome everybody in this morning. A lot of good people in the chat already. John, look at this. This is one of the things I love most about our Birds 365 community. So we get a couple comments this morning. Brett the Aussie. Good day from down under, ladies and gentlemen. Then we get Eagle Mike. Good morning from Montreal, Canada. Good morning, Eagle Mike. And then we get Lumpy. Good morning and greetings from Germany. We got Germany, Montreal, and Australia. And the first couple commenters of the day. That's pretty good stuff. We are talking to people all over the world, and it's honestly a great feeling. I love that all of you guys are here. We appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Make sure you drop a like on the show if you're enjoying the content. John, so what's the expectation then coming into this year? I mean, look, you're an objective person. You're an objective reporter of this football team. You do not wear eagle-colored glasses. Is this like sound the alarm bells here coming into the season on the linebacker position?
Well, I mean, on paper, it's the weakest position on the team, I would argue by far.
Can it be overcome though, John? Can it be overcome?
Yeah, it can be overcome, but I think it starts with Nakobe Dean more than anybody else. I mean, yes, he's got to stay healthy. Yes, he's got to prove he's capable in pass coverage, but at least he's instinctive. Yes, he's undersized. There's a lot of question marks, but to me, he's still the one with the biggest upside, still the one with the significant upside, rather than a large sample size Devin White, or somebody like Zach Bond, who's sort of a shot in the dark more than anything else. And then, I don't think Trotter's going to be ready this early. And when he is ready, he's very similar to Nakobe Dean. A lot of redundancy there. Not the most athletic guy in the world. And we're talking NFL athleticism, not normal people athleticism. Yeah. But very instinctive player. So very similar from that standpoint. I think, again, he'll come into it more in 2025. The guy besides Nakobe, the guy I'm intrigued by is Ben VanSumeren.
Yeah, I read your article. I kind of came away with the same thing
because he's like weird, freaky athlete, very similar to Devin White. Obviously, barely played at the college level. I'm not comparing them as college players,
right?
And that's why he was undrafted. But he's freaky athletic, and he seemed to have a natural affinity in a very small sample size, which admittedly, but he didn't look like a fish out of water. He looked like he picked it up pretty quickly. And one of the knocks on Nakobe Dean at Tampa is freelancing, not the most instinctive guy. Maybe he doesn't have the best discipline in the world. And maybe it's one of those things where, sort of like what Jeff Stoutland talks about Jordan Mailata when he talks about developing. He didn't have any bad habits to fix. It's really hard to fix bad habits that you've been doing for years and years and years. And Jordan came in as a lump of clay. Now, Ben VanSumeren's not like that. He's played football,
right?
But he played very little football. And maybe he doesn't have all the bad habits you have to correct.
How about him as an instinctual player? Is he an instinctual player? Does he have that? Because a lot of times you hear, the great athletes, but they're not as instinctive. And TJ, like TJ Edwards, he wasn't the greatest athlete, but his instincts were perfect almost at the line of scrimmage. How is VanSumeren line up in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, that's the book on Ben. That's why he didn't get drafted, because he barely played. He was very raw. And the thought process would be that you have to teach him a lot, and you do. But what I'm trying to say is when he was forced into action, for a very small period, he played like 50 snaps. So, but he looked kind of instinctive. He played 36 snaps in week 16. And he looked okay. He didn't look overwhelmed. And it's just a small window, but that's what you're looking for at this position with the
Eagles. Absolutely. Especially when you have the players that we have. I mean, it's not like they're not playing behind Fred Warner here. We're looking for anything from anybody, basically. John, real quick though, how many off-ball linebackers will this team look to keep on the roster? And if and based on whatever number you say, how's it going to shake out? Who's going to make? You got Nakobe Dean, you have Devin White, you have Zach Bond, you have Oren Burks, you have Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and you have Ben VanSumeren. That's 6 names, right? That's 6 names. So how many do they keep, and who's on the brink of on the bubble of making the roster or getting cut?
Well, Dean and Devin are Nakobe and Devin White are pretty much locked in.
Yep, I would agree with that.
And Trotter's going to make the team, obviously, as a rookie. So then you start finagling there. What's interesting, Oren Burks is probably, the least exciting guy, but you know he can handle the third linebacker role, and he's a good special teams player. But if I'm the Eagles, if Ben shows anything over the summer, and he might have a crappy summer and it might be answered for them,
Right.
but if he shows anything, I'm keeping him over Oren Burks and or Zach Bond. Zach Bond's the guy who could be a big part of this team or cut.
Yeah, it's funny.
I
Yeah.
mean, we don't know about Zach Bond, so he's going to be an interesting story. But I mean, the Eagles signed him to a 1-year deal for the veteran minimum and some decent incentives. So 90% he's going to make the team. But if he shows up in summer and it's just awful, I mean, they can move on very easily. Very easily.
Yeah, so we'll see how it shakes out. Curious to see kind of who makes this team. How many do you think they'll keep though, John? 4,
5.
5.
And mainly because you need linebackers, special teams. But again,
Right.
4, 5, 6 aren't that different from 1, 2, 3, to be honest.
Is there any big difference in special teams ability on those back end guys?
Well,
Like Oren Burks, a better player than
Ben showed he's a good special teams player when he got the
that could
opportunity.
give him an edge. Yeah.
Oren's a very good special teams player in other places, but has been. Yeah, I mean, Nakobe, not so much. He's not used to playing it. So you don't want Nakobe as a backup.
No.
To say the least.
Look, if Nakobe's a backup and a special teams player, then by all means that we failed at the linebacker position. We'll know that very early on. He's supposed to be the guy, right? I mean, he's supposed to be your number one guy.
Well, I think it's not. Last year was supposed to be concrete your number one guy, and the Eagles were counting on him. This year, I think they want to see him prove it over the summer, but they want him to be the number one guy. So it's not quite as concrete, but they certainly want it to happen. And it starts with health. He's got to be best ability is availability. Got to be on the field. And if he's on the field, and I'm not saying this is great, but if he's on the field, he's going to be the Eagles' best linebacker. Now, that might not even be good enough, but if he's on the field, he's going to be their best linebacker.
John, we got a couple commenters, and this is pretty funny. Joe Ho says, Ray, who the hell is VanSumeren? Can you walk us through, Johnny Mac? Where did Ben VanSumeren come from? Not every fan knows who the hell Ben VanSumeren is.
Well, he was undrafted, and if this is, go back to TJ Edwards, he made the ironic transfer from Michigan to Michigan State. College, which obviously you're going over enemy lines. Just a freaky athlete, tremendously strong, tremendously fast, tests very well, but he barely played in college. So he was very raw. Nobody really knew what he was, but he runs a 4.45. I'm just pulling up his pre-draft stuff. He's got a 42.5-inch vertical leap. He's got almost an 11-foot broad jump. So those are the two things they measure explosion for, vertical jump and broad jump. And he's doing 29 reps on the bench at 6'2", 231. He's a freak athlete. But he barely played. So you're trying to tap into something. If you go way back, he played linebacker, defensive line, quarterback, running back, wide receiver. He was one of those guys that was an athlete. You'll see it in recruiting circles. The college fans will know, sometimes when big time schools recruit somebody, like when Michigan was recruiting Ben, they might say athlete Ben VanSumeren before they decide what position they're going to play him at. And that, and to that end, Michigan recruited him originally to play fullback and running back, and then moved him to linebacker. So that's how athletic he is. He was recruited to be a big running back, and they ultimately moved him to linebacker. And he barely played at Michigan. That's why he transferred to Michigan State. But then he played quite a bit, not, a decent amount in 1 year with Michigan State. But again, that's not a big sample size. And he got an opportunity to play last year in the one game, and he looked like he wasn't overwhelmed. So I'm just trying to find a sliver of hope.
Yeah.
He's got the athleticism to play. And he doesn't have the bad habits, or you haven't seen the bad habits because he hasn't played. So maybe Bobby King, the new linebackers coach, Vic Fangio, supposed to be the best defensive teacher in the history of the world. Maybe they could teach him and develop him properly.
Let's see if Ben VanSumeren can turn out to be anything. But boy, overall, weak position. I mean, a good preview of the position from John McMullen there as we start off this Wednesday edition of Birds 365. But boy, it's a weak position. We will see if Vic Fangio can turn garbage into gold, at this position. So let's see how it works. We got Mike Gill in the waiting room. I want to welcome and thank everybody for being here this morning. Make sure you guys drop a like. Stay tuned. Mike Gill coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Wednesday's edition of Birds 365. Just 6 days out from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp for the start of the 2024 football season. Joined now by Mike Gill from 97.3 ESPN down the shore. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Good morning, fellas. What's happening?
How are you, Mike? Good to see you. You probably heard a little bit when you're in the green room, so I'm going to ask you: Can you play a little linebacker at this stage?
At this stage, no. I did play linebacker at one stage of my life, but it's been about 30 years, and I wasn't very good at it, so they moved me to safety.
Well, you'll fit right in. You'll fit right in with the Eagles.
I project to like today's linebackers, mostly safety. Yeah, the linebacker spot is. I think it's an ultimate wild card, though. I heard you guys talk about Ben VanSumeren. I mean,
yeah, I'm talking about
one of these guys that has like just uber athletic ability. He would be like a Mike Mamola back in the day, right? He would test really well, and you'd be like, wow. The question is, how does that translate into fitting into a scheme, and how does that translate into game action? Devin White has all the traits. He's the 5th pick in the draft. You know, he's only 26 years old, too. We did a list yesterday of the top 10 players in Philly, 25 years and younger. That list was sad. It's filled with guys who have never even stepped on the field before. Yeah. And Devin White happens to be 26 years old, so he doesn't qualify. But he's another guy.
Yeah, I see those 20. Now, for the Eagles, most of their really good players are like, just missed the crux.
Well, like Smith would be Smith and Dickerson and Carter, Jordan Davis would be the ones that are actually on the roster that have played. Hurts will be 26 when the season starts. Yeah. So Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean get on that list basically because there's nobody else in town. Yeah. But the linebacker position with Devin White being 26, Nakobe Dean is 23, by the way. When you see that, and think about it, he's such a young guy, and you wonder like how much more learning there is in there for him. I think one of the things about Dean that was attractive, though, was that he was kind of like a veteran college player, was a smart guy, and that many people thought he would be pretty much game ready once he entered the league. But you don't realize, when he got in the league at 21 years old, he was such a young guy. Where is he now in that development? This position has so many interesting twists and turns, and they're all better than me.
Can Vic Fangio overcome the weakness at this position, Mike Gill? I mean, I don't know why Howie neglects this position, but can it be overcome this year? We all have high expectations. Everybody's talking about how Vic Fangio is going to turn this defense around. I'm not really seeing evidence of a lot of great players that he got in addition to last year, but can he overcome this linebacker position?
Well, Zander, he can overcome it if the guys can play. I mean, they didn't think they had great linebackers, I'm assuming, with TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. I think those guys surprised everybody, right? TJ Edwards became a guy that got a contract that signed in free agency. I don't think the Eagles, when they got him and plugged him into that spot, knew or thought at that time they were getting a guy that was going to be highly sought after. So, yeah, they can overcome it if these guys can reach their potential. Devin White has a ton of potential. Can Vic Fangio kind of, reel him in a little bit and get him to understand it? 26 years old, you can't be a wild man running all over the field using all your athletic talent like maybe you did your first couple of years in the league. Can he kind of reel Ben VanSumeren to be something more? Can he get more out of Nakobe Dean? Can Nakobe Dean stay healthy? Look, we don't really know if Nakobe can play at this level. He hasn't been healthy enough to show us one way or another. So there's not enough sample size from him to say he is or isn't. And quite frankly, after that, I mean, those are the two guys. It's White and Dean. They're the two guys I imagine they're hoping get most of the snaps. That's their TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. And they're hoping that, look, if these guys can play to their potential, they're better than that duo. I don't think they will be better than that duo, but weren't both of those players? Don't both of those players have a higher pedigree than those two previous ones?
Sure. Everybody's got a higher pedigree than TJ Edwards, but people got to get over that. I mean, TJ, I was talking about TJ again yesterday. I've talked about him too much. People who watch this show know I'm a big TJ Edwards guy. One of the reasons I am is because I saw him from day one to the day he left and saw that development and growth. And he's not even the same guy physically as the guy who ran a 4.87, which was the reason he wasn't drafted. 4.87 is a freaking disaster, Mike.
Yeah.
Linebacker going into the NFL. Remember, TJ Edwards was second. He was a great college player. He was second in the Butkus voting. In his
And
last,
by the way, Nakobe Dean and Devin White were both excellent college. These guys are all excellent college players. But you're right. TJ Edwards was not thought to be on their level because he didn't get drafted. Devin White was the 5th pick in the draft.
Yeah. And he didn't get drafted because he ran a 4.87. And Devin got drafted number 5 because he's the freaky 4.4 guy, who also excelled, unlike VanSumeren, who's the freaky 4.4 guy. He excelled at the college level. He was a tremendous college linebacker at LSU. But at some point, here's my deal. Here's why I have more optimism. And you can tap in. You're a youth baseball coach. Now, you don't get the kids as long. But when you have a sample size of 5 years, I don't care how old they are. That's the guy. That's a big sample size. That guy ain't changing. Now, why I still have some optimism for Nakobe Dean, he's barely played. I don't know what he is.
Right. Nakobe Dean, we just don't have enough resume on at this level. He's been hurt. Now, the few games that he's played, I don't know that you can take anything from them, right? He played 3 games last year. The year before, what did he play in? A handful of snaps.
Yeah,
so he has
snaps.
barely played a quarter. I mean, and I say a quarter, not 12 minutes. I'm talking about 4 games. He barely played a quarter of an NFL season. So Dean has to be the one that really finally finds his footing in this league. And I say that for 2 reasons. Finds his footing that he can stay healthy and becomes the player that many people thought should have been a 1st-round pick. And then when he slid to the 3rd round, it was almost like the Eagles had to finally tap in and say, all right, we'll take a linebacker. But people were almost outraged that he didn't. How did this guy got not picked in the 1st round? Well, he hasn't done anything in 2 years for multiple reasons. He couldn't get on the field the 1st year because he wasn't better than the 2 guys that were here. And last year he got hurt. And that was one of the questions about him coming into the draft was, could he stay healthy? So that's he would have to be a complete wild card entering this season. Can he be better than either of the 2 guys that were his predecessors, White or Edwards? I don't think anybody is excited to, or I think you would be excited if he could, but I don't think anybody's anticipating that. And then Devin White, as you said, 5 years in the league, he kind of is what he is. The one thing I will say about that, John, is if you coach a guy for 5 years, at what point does he need to kind of go and get a different voice or something different?
Well, that's what,
to get more out
the
of him?
ironic thing is that's what Todd Bowles said. And remember, Todd Bowles is a great defensive coordinator. If you're talking about top 5 defensive coordinators, and he's a head coach now, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Todd's going to be in the conversation with Vic, with Jim Schwartz, guys like that. So it's not like he got poor coaching in Tampa. And by the way, to that point, when Devin talked to us, he loves Todd Bowles. He loves him. Called him a father figure, still checks in with him, very worried about him. Obviously was a little depressed, disappointed about where he was from a contract standpoint. So he loves the guy, and he couldn't tap into what it was. I just don't. And by the way, I hope I'm wrong. But generally, when you have slow starters, like Brandon Graham was a slow starter. Part of it was an injury, tore his ACL. Obviously, fans were calling him a bust, mainly because Earl Thomas was picked right after him, Jason Pierre-Paul. And they wanted those guys, and all of a sudden, Brandon takes off. I got a tough time coming up with a guy who takes off in his 6th year. And he's played. It's not like he didn't play for 3 of those years, 3 of those 5. He was a starter day one, and he got progressively worse throughout his time in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think this is a classic case of draft status making people more excited than maybe they should be.
It's
and
interesting though, because he did get the 5th-year option picked up, which is like if he had so many bad years, like you know what I mean, you can kind of go away from that and not pay him that.
The
big
1 year
money.
was he not first team All Pro 1 year?
He was, but that was earlier in his career. I mean, and then
like 2019.
That was all tied to 9 sacks.
Right.
Yeah, 9 sacks.
Yep.
And that's what and I'm going to kill my brethren and our buddy Rob Motti, knows the boaters for the AP, and Rob, get me a boat because people are making bad decisions. That's a bad decision. He was never an All-Pro level player. So, but I get it. It's on the resume, and look, I'm going to pull it up again.
To be fair to Devin, and look, I don't have a lot of excitement or expectations there as well. And a lot of that, look, admittedly, it's funny because the same people were saying that voted him to be an All-Pro are now also the people that are saying, he's not that much of a player. But the year they won the Super Bowl, now of small sample size, he was pretty darn good in that run.
He was phenomenal. Well, that Zander will tell you. Yeah. It's one of the greatest anomalies in sports. For 3 games, he was what people thought he was. For 3 games in Tampa Bay's run to the Super Bowl. And people hate when I bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up because you're here, Mike. These are PFF career grades for Devin White. 2019, number 68 of 90 linebackers as a rookie. Not, all right, he's a rookie, he's learning. Number 2020, when I believe he was the All-Pro season, 62 of 83. He was worse than he was as a rookie from the overall grade. 2021, 79th of 86. 2022, 74th of 81. 2023 last season, 80 of 82. Now, people say, well, PFF sucks when they're criticizing play. Look, when they're giving Jordan Mailata great grades, everybody loves that. When they're giving A.J. Brown great grades, everybody loves that. When they're giving Lane Johnson great grades, my point is, when somebody's playing well, they get it right. When somebody's playing poorly, they get it right. Now, there's a lot of context, scheme, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to boil it down, if they say somebody's playing poorly, they're playing poorly.
Well, I'll go back to Zander's question. Can Vic Fangio overcome some of that? Can he do anything? What evidence in the past can we compare Devin White to in terms of somebody that Vic has worked with that he can tap into what he did with somebody else? I mean, that's a lot of times you say, hey, we talked about it, I think last week, he gets Van Ginkel last year and he saw something in him to say, I'm going to use him like this. And that gets more out of him. Is there a linebacker that he has had in the past that he can use Devin White comparably to?
I'd have to do a deep dive into the history of Vic Fangio.
Well, he had the green dot in the spring. He was calling the defense in the spring, hopefully because N'Kobe wasn't, 100% yet.
I think, though, that's the answer, Zander. No one stands out as a linebacker who played, that played for Vic in the past that you're like, that's the kind of player that he can use Devin White in the same mold.
And I've heard the pass rush part, because the one thing that Devin White can do is go get the quarterback. However, because of his athleticism. However, he's not a better pass rusher than Bryce Huff. He's not a better pass rusher than Josh Sweat. He's just the kind of guy who's going to be able to blitz and catch you off guard. 2 things there. Vic doesn't blitz a lot. And when he does, it's generally going to be a zone drop. So you're taking the better pass rusher and dropping him into coverage for the lesser pass rusher. So he's a very smart guy. I don't think you're going to see that consistently. That's a curveball. I don't got a lot of hope, and I hope I'm wrong. And my hope resides in guys like Ben and N'Kobe, who we have less of a sample size on. And maybe you can develop those players because they don't have the bad habits. That's where I was going originally when I brought up your coaching. Mike, even at a lower level, you know how hard it is to correct bad habits.
Yeah. It is. And, by the way, I think Vic Fangio worked with Patrick Willis, might be one of the linebackers that he has had in his past. Pretty good linebacker. And I think Vic came here, right, with a reputation of having solid linebacker play. I just don't know what that means. Are we looking for a flashy playmaker? Are we looking for a guy who's a splash play? Are we looking for what the Eagles got in TJ Edwards and Kaiser White? Just two solid linebackers. Like, they weren't flashy. They didn't jump off the page. They didn't look at their numbers and have 15 pass breakups and 2 interceptions and 4 sacks. I mean, they didn't have, years where the numbers jumped out. They just did, Bill Belichick. They just did their job. They were just solid. They did every week. The year before, I remember you would have, oh my God, what was his name? The safety from Nebraska, 47.
Nate Gary, 47, I would call him, because I said the other team would look on the game tape and say, find 47 and throw the ball in that area. He sucked. He was horrible. Which is ironic because he was a safety, and you would
Exactly.
think he'd be better in coverage.
He was so bad in pass coverage as a linebacker, though. But, the Eagles linebackers that year, they didn't do anything that hurt the team. Did they do anything that stood out? Were they the reason why the defense was very good? Probably not. It just was that they didn't make mistakes. They were sound in the scheme. Is that too much to ask? Is just be sound in the scheme. Don't, try to do too much. Just kind of get your job done. I don't know. Devin White doesn't profile as that kind of player in my eyes. Nakobe Dean might. He might be the smart guy.
Well, yeah.
That
he's got the high football IQ. If you're talking about football IQ, you're talking Nakobe and Trotter. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. that's his reputation as well. High football IQ, but I think he's more about 2025 and 2026 as a developmental player. For this season, they wanted to be Nakobe Dean and Devin White. I can't even tell you today who's going to be the middle linebacker and who's going to be the weak side linebacker. I assume they wanted to be Nakobe to be the green dot. But I don't know that for a fact. And much of the uncertainty, and I joked about it, when we asked Vic about the linebackers, he had to go into his pocket and get his roster out and say, all right, what do we got here? And I think in a lot of ways, Mike, that's their plan. That's how he's playing. Vic will figure it out at linebacker. That's his plan. And I don't know if that's fair to Vic Fangio.
Right. Yeah, that's what you do. You're the GM. You get a player and you say to the position coach or the coach, here you go. Make this guy a linebacker. Make him a good linebacker. Work with him every day. Get him up to speed. A lot of things that I wonder. You have Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and the guys up front, taking up the space with athletic linebackers behind him. You're going to see a guy like Devin White make 140 tackles in this type of defense. Is that what they want what do they want from their linebackers in this defense? I think that's another question that needs to be asked. And what do they want? And can these guys provide that? Are we asking them to do something they can't do? Or do we just want you to, hey, you got 2 space eaters up in front of you. We want to go up and tackle. I don't know. What role do the linebackers have in Vic's defense?
Yeah, competency. I think that's all they want. Competency. I think that's the goal. I don't think they care. That's for outside the building. Like, people want sacks and tackles. They don't give a shit about that, but they just want to stop people on third down, get off the field. They want competency at linebacker. And to me, it's a little bit unfair. And to boil it back to Todd Bowles, like I said, look, it's very unlikely Vic Fangio is going to have the same relationship with Devin White as Todd did. Again, he looks at him as a father figure. He looks at him, he loves the guy. So I don't think there's going to be any untapped, he's going to figure out, Devin White's mentality more than Todd. That's my biggest concern of all. Like, if Todd Bowles can't tap into it, people are putting way too much on Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
And I think Vic's great, But I mean, so was Todd Bowles. I mean,
It's a
let's be honest.
microcosm, John, of the fan relationship with the coach in all sports. The coach sucks. You got to get a new coach. And then the new coach comes in and he sucks too. At what point do the fans realize it's not the coach's fault 85 to 90% of the time? In football, there are, I think, more coaching things that you can, put blame on the coach because they do call every single play. But as we talk about that, if the play is executed right and it works, it's a great call. If it doesn't, yada, yada. But the fans always love to blame the coach. And therefore, they feel like when there's a coach that has a higher pedigree, that everything will be fixed and everything will be changed. It's like when the then Redskins sucked for all those years. They brought back Joe Gibbs. Well, we got Joe Gibbs. He was a great coach. He won Super Bowls. Well, guess what? He wasn't the same coach as he was back then because the players weren't as good. It's like you can't just always fix the coach and that fix everything. That being said, I do think that will help in the Eagles' situation of the problems they had a year ago to what they have now.
Yeah, I agree with that. Speaking, since you brought that up, let's go to the offensive side of the football. Too much talking about the linebacker position.
I know. I'm looking up at my TV, and the Eagles' offense is on my screen for the last 15 minutes.
All right. Well, we'll start. I want to talk about. Have you been watching Hard Knocks? We'll talk about the Hard Knocks.
I saw the first episode. I have not found the second. I don't have Max, so I've been seeing the clips. Was last night the third episode?
Yeah.
So I have not seen 2 and 3, but I have seen
HBO okey doked everybody. Everybody ran with, the Giants offered. Say no, they didn't. If people watch the show, it was a hypothetical. If we offer him blah blah blah, will he come back? And the answer was essentially no. So the Giants kind of tapped out. But that's what happened with Saquon Barkley.
So what I've seen is that John Mara is not sleeping a whole heck.
Oh my God, John Mara is a disaster. But boy, if Jody was here, he would kill me because he loves John Mara. He's a New York guy, and everybody loves John Mara. But boy, he's a fan, Mike. He's like, we got to keep Eli. We got to keep Saquon. Win a damn game. Move on. Build a different way.
His comment is personifies it. If you're the GM of the team and you have the owner saying, well, he's by far the most popular guy we have, by far the most popular guy. Who cares who's most popular? I mean,
but you guys and I both know that matters, especially when you're an owner. This is the NFL.
I'll tell you where it matters, Zander, when your team sucks.
Exactly. Exactly.
When you know your team sucks and you need something to give the fans excitement about, when you know your team will not be successful, then yes, having a uberly popular player, you need some reason to have. And I think, they understand they stink.
Was interesting.
Well, Joe does. I don't think John does. John Mara.
John, what did you think about this? Because the other thing that was interesting to me in that clip was Joe Schoen says to the owner, I think the Eagles are out. That was clearly bad information that he was given. He said, I got a call.
I think he was. I think he was trying to talk because it seemed like the biggest goal of John Mara was to get Saquon back. Yes, but if they weren't going to get him back, to keep him out of the division, hopefully Chicago.
You could hear, and Joe Schoen was just crying and dying to get the information from the agent of, please don't tell me it was in the division. And you could almost, without him saying, please don't tell me it's Philadelphia. It was like, any other team, please tell me who's the agent.
But that from Joe's standpoint, Joe Schoen's standpoint, that was about acquiescing to the owner. You get to see some of the inner workings of what these GMs have to deal with.
It is.
And again, this has to do with the advantage the Eagles have with Jeffrey Lurie. He's a very good owner, as opposed to a very bad owner, which you're seeing live in practice. So Jane's worried when Joe Schoen is worried about talking to Ed Berry, Saquon Barkley's agent. He's worried about John Mara's reaction. He doesn't give a shit. He's probably happy, to be honest, Now he's
Shane.
got a long way to go to get where the Eagles are. They haven't been competitive, but he's been saying we've been wasting our time trying to build around a running back. Now the Eagles aren't doing that, but I'm just saying, and at the end he said we're going to be fine because he didn't want the player.
Right. Shane, so in retro, like if you're pulling the lens out here and looking in, Shane looks bad because if you're perceiving that the owner's right, he's saying the owner is an idiot, basically. He is trying to rewire the owner's brain to say, we don't need to be spending your money on a running back here if we want to win. You brought me here from Buffalo. We had no running back in Buffalo. We were going with a bunch of different guys. Let me do my thing and get out of here. But you can't say that to the owner of the team.
And this is the reason why the Eagles want no part of these types of shows. Could you imagine?
I can't imagine anybody wants any parts of these shows. Come on.
Yeah, anybody, but the Eagles have a good organization, but they have some very real conversations when it comes to players that would upset fans. I'll just say that. Some very real and honest conversations about player evaluation that would upset fans. And they don't want that in the public. They do not want that in the public. I asked a bunch of guys, as an example, Howie said they drafted 5 Red Star players this year up on the podium. And, you know, Sidney Brown was a Red Star player. Red Star player, for people that don't know, it's not blue chip. It's somebody that fits the Eagles culture. They're good on the field. They're good off the field. They're good. I asked some people I know in the organization, you know, basically off the record, and I could say because they didn't answer, they didn't want to answer. And why do they don't want to answer? Because they don't want it getting out who isn't a Red Star player and who they have some concerns about. So, you know, when it's one guy, you can say, oh, Sidney Brown's a Red Star player, as Howie did eventually. He mentioned they drafted 5 Red Star. Now, you can guess a bunch of them because Will Shipley's the most Red Star players in history, but you can guess a bunch of them. They don't want it out there. They don't want these conversations out in any kind of public or seeping out in public. Jalen Hurts, there are some difficult conversations they've had over the years with Jalen Hurts. They don't want that out there. They don't want it out there. Everybody blames the media, Mike, when we tell them, oh, the Eagles were trying to, you know, change Deshaun Watson's mind back in the day, or they wanted Russell Wilson back in the day. They don't want to hear that. And you could blame it on the evil media.
I can't imagine any team wants to be on this show. But after seeing the show for the first season, I can imagine fans, they like this more than the training camp one. They like this way more than the in-season one. This is what every fan, you know, the fans, we've gotten to a weird culture where the off-season building of a team is almost more enjoyable than the season itself for some. You know, it's the Sixers process. We love watching the tear down and the build back up. Why? Because we all feel that we could do that job. We've done it playing John Madden football our whole lives. We draft a franchise and we cut guys and we, you know, build a salary cap and we make trades. We all feel that we could do that job. So the GM portion of the job is way more appealing to fans because it's something they can relate to more so than playing the game.
Yeah,
none of us can play. We know we can't play.
Or coaching. Yeah, because coaching's
and that's why the coach gets blamed a lot. There are a lot of people out there that feel that they could coach. But
to your point about popular players, I wanted to flesh that out as well. And you're right about when you're bad, you need to focus on a popular player. You need to pump that up. You need to get somebody in the building, all that kind of stuff. There's a business aspect to it. Well, you know what, if you win, you got a shitload of popular players. That's where it would frustrate me to no end if I'm Joe Shane working for John Mara. I'm like, dude, if we win games, we'll have 10 Saquon Barkleys. Everybody will love everybody if they win games.
Well, Yes and no. I see what your point is. If you win, everybody's happy and they don't care who you're winning with. But what is your ceiling of winning? Are you 9-8 like they were,
No,
or
I
whatever?
mean win.
Yeah,
Win.
yeah, sure, absolutely. Like if you are a Super Bowl level team, and I think that John Mara realizes that they're not there. Right? He's saying we're not a 13-4 team. And therefore, I need something to sell to my fan base. I need somebody's jersey to be bought. Now they don't have that. Now, Joe Shane might say, hey, this year we might win 7 games, which could turn into 10 games. He's looking at the long view of this. The problem in today's sports society is you don't get the long view. And if John Mara's sitting there watching Showtime last night, he's probably saying, I got to get rid of this guy. He's looking at the long game, and I want to win in the short term because how old am I? I don't have a long game to enjoy this ownership right now. So it's a weird dynamic where generally you have the young GM who's looking long term and a guy who's at the end of the road owning the team, making the has the purse strings.
The frustrating, and I'm going to kill John Mara here. The frustrating part with John Mara, if I'm a Giants fan or somebody involved, I mean, they did this with Eli Manning when Eli was just awful, and they kept bringing him back and bringing him back and bringing him back, and they wouldn't make the tough decision. And this is why they've been bad for a decade plus with one.
It's hard. A lot of
anomaly
teams
of the
do it,
season.
though. A lot of teams do it. You see it in every sport. You hold on to the championship core too long, and then it just, it becomes quickly decrepit. We've seen it in Philly a lot. The 93 team went to a World Series. They brought some of those guys back. They got old really fast, and then they were gone. The 08 Phillies team, they were good for 09, 10, and 11, but they kept hanging on, 12, 13, and those guys just couldn't hold up anymore, and it led to 10 miserable baseball seasons because you tried to hold on to Utley and Rollins and Howard for way too long.
Yeah, it is difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but
the Eagles, to some extent, did it after they won that Super Bowl in 2017. They gave Alshon Jeffrey the extension. They kept some guys probably a little, and they admitted it. They said, hey, we thought we had the window and we went after it.
Eli, I can buy that explanation. Maybe it's the right word. I don't want to use excuse, but because they had success with Eli Manning. They won 2 Super Bowls. They were 25, 48, and 1 with Saquon Barkley. Now, there's a lot of context, a lot of poor supporting cast. To me, this is one of the easiest decisions. And by the way, this has nothing to do for the Eagles. Saquon Barkley makes some sense. We'll see if it works out. For the New York Giants, it makes no sense. They tried to build a foundation.
It also made no sense when they drafted him with the number 2 pick.
Yes.
Yeah, it did. Made zero sense.
From day one, it made no sense. And this moron, John Maris, he's gonna not sleep. Why? So so over the next number of seasons, you lose 70% of your games. I mean, what are we doing here? Eagles fans should rejoice every morning that Jeffrey Lurie is their owner.
Hey, they've won as many playoff games with Saquon as the Cowboys have in about 20 years.
One. And that was the anomaly season. And, but
they
for
beat
the Eagles,
that Vikings team.
And a really bad defensive one, by the way, with that Donatel. But for the Eagles, it makes some sense because it's a luxury. It's not a foundational piece. And that's the difference.
He is probably the third offensive option on the team. Yeah, it's like a Paul Heyman ECW edition. You're accentuating his positives here. I'm not bringing him in to be a superstar. I'm bringing him in to accentuate the positives of our offense. I've already got Brown and Smith and this offensive line and Goddard. They've already been here. The foundation of what they do is here. We're just upgrading a position that's been, by the way, Miles Sanders scored 11 touchdowns and had over 1,000 yards for you 2 years ago. Now No one even knows what he's doing. DeAndre Swift had 1,000 yards rushing here last year. You're just bringing in a more talented player than the two that already excelled in this offense and just hoping for more, because when teams game plan for the Eagles before, they're not game planning for Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift. They're afterthoughts. Now you can't make Saquon Barkley an afterthought. He has to be a part of your thought tree. I think putting together a game plan.
I think people were a little bit worried about Miles as a runner. A little bit. So I don't think it's going to be that different, but we'll see in the passing game. That's where he has to set himself apart, not only as a receiver, but as a pass protector. He's a better pass protector. I thought it was ironic Chicago was the other team. They obviously signed DeAndre Swift, but they were haggling. Is it going to be Saquon, DeAndre? The Eagles wanted DeAndre back if they weren't going to get Saquon. So it was really the Bears and the Eagles more than the Giants and the Eagles. And the Bears ended up getting DeAndre. So we'll see how that works out for them. Mike Gill Show, 97.3 ESPN, locally ESPN South Jersey. We got a lot of international listeners. So I'm not sure if the guys from, where were they from, Zander? Australia,
Germany, Australia, and a Canada this morning, all checking in the first couple.
But they can listen on the app. So listen to Mike. 97.3 ESPN.
3 or 4 days. I'm off the next 3 or 4 days. I did this special for you guys.
I appreciate that. You're gearing up for training camp, but still listen to the guys. I assume Josh Henning is going to.
Josh and Nicky Earnshaw. Nicky Earnshaw and Josh are in for me.
And Mike will be back for the start of camp next week.
Yep.
Enjoy the season, buddy. Appreciate it.
Mike, thanks for joining us, man.
All right, boys. See you.
Thanks.
There's Mike Gill joining us on Birds 365. Does a great job on 97.3 ESPN, as Johnny Mack just pointed out. So good stuff there for Mike Gill. A lot of linebacker talk today, which is all good. John, before we get to a break, I do want to address one super chat we got when you had Mike up. It's regarding Devin White. I was going to bring it up, but we already flowed into a different part of the conversation. James says, I get PFF grades on White and agree with J-Mac generally, but what about voted NFL top 100 2 times in a row, which is voted by players?
Yeah, that's even more important. I have been in that locker room.
Yeah,
when the Eagles, and I've told this story many times, every year there's a day the NFL people come in and do the top 100 list in the locker room. And I'm lucky enough to be there they spend about 10 seconds thinking about that, if that. And they generally vote for their teammates. The NFL top 100 list is a waste of time. It is not meaningful in any way. They vote on, I will say this, and I say this all the time, when it comes to players and their peers, they value the guys who are really, really athletic and freakish, and that's what Devin is. So people look at him and they say, wow, he's special from an athleticism standpoint. But, like AJ. AJ is very, very honest when it comes to corners. I love talking to him about corners and about opposing corners. And I tell you all the time, one of the reasons I'm so high on Kaylee Ringo is because AJ is so high on Kaylee Ringo. He does not respect zone corners. He does not respect corners that cannot match him physically. There's a bunch of good zone corners that are better than man-to-man corners. But he's enamored with the guys who can at least somewhat keep up with him from an athleticism standpoint. Guys I've covered, like Randy Moss and Adrian Peterson. Now, they're great players, but they're also freakish athletes. So when you get the Aaron Donalds of the world, Brandon Brooks used to talk about Aaron Donald with awe. They respect freakish athleticism. And that's why Devin was on that list. He did not deserve to be on that list.
Good response there from John McMullen. John, it's interesting. We were talking about Eli Manning. I'm just going into the chat, reading some of the comments that we got from, regarding that. I'm obviously an Eagles fan. I don't like the New York Giants, but I think Eli Manning gets way too much hate. I mean, Eli Manning has more Super Bowl rings than the entire Eagles franchise, as Barbara Carroll points out. Look, I know that he was the win record's 500 and all that, but we're playing for Super Bowls. Eli Manning won 2 of them against the greatest coach-quarterback combination in the history of the NFL. I think he deserves a little bit more credit than he's given.
Yeah, I'm not in that camp. I'm the opposite. To me, about quarterback play, he had 2 great runs. I've always compared Eli Manning to the street shooter. And I've always compared him NBA-wise to Benny Johnson for old school NBA fans, the microwave. Now, occasionally on a day, and this can relate to Nick Foles and his run here as well, occasionally on a given day when Benny would get hot, there's nobody you'd want more than Benny Johnson. But over the long haul, you wanted Isaiah Thomas or Joe Dumars. Consistently great players day in and day out. You talk about that 500 record. I mean, Eli was a good quarterback for 7-8 years. And and then they just started losing and losing and losing and losing.
Yeah, so it came down
losing.
at the tail end of his career. It came down a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about 32, 30, where he should be in the prime of his career. That's when he started trickling down and losing games. And they had one anomaly year where they were 11-5, very similar to 2 years ago when they had the anomaly year. But they were 7-9 and 6-10 and 6-10 and 3-12 and 5-11. It was clear, look, he wasn't a good quarterback any longer. And John Mara kept going, well, he's Eli Manning and he won 2 Super Bowls. All right. I always say Derek Jeter's my best comparison there. At the end of his career, look, he wasn't very good, but the Yankees had to let him play it out. They had to.
Absolutely.
Eli Manning ain't Derek Jeter.
No, but
he was a good quarterback and with a couple good runs. And I get it. When you win Super Bowl, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I say this all the time because he won 2 Super Bowls. He is not a Hall of Fame quarterback. Hall of Fame quarterback is about longevity, consistency, true greatness, week in and week out. That's what it should be about. What it's about is, he won 2 Super Bowls. Jim Plunkett, ironically, and I'm going back too far for most young people. He won 2 Super Bowls. He's not in, and he's not in because he wasn't a great, consistent quarterback for many years. And he was basically 70. I'm looking it up. 72 and 72, 500. Perfect comparison. He's a 500 quarterback. People then understood a couple great runs, but he's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. Same thing with Eli. It's different now, though. He's getting in.
No, I'm not
500
he's
quarterback.
also Manning, so that helps.
Well, that helps too.
Yeah. But no, I mean, look, I definitely understand what you're saying in terms of, I mean, he was not
his brother.
No, he was not. But look,
and for me,
if he gets 1, John, it's a different conversation. He got it twice. I mean,
Yeah, but for me, Peyton Manning to me is the definition of consistent greatness.
Yeah, but here's the question. Right? Here's the question. I understand what you're saying about consistent greatness. What would you take over the last? It's 2024. The last 24 years. Who would you take? The Eagles or the Giants?
I mean, that's like the rivalry of kindling versus fire. Kindling. The Eagles have been
the better team. But my point is that Eli Manning has 2 rings. We have 1.
Oh, you're going back to the 2 Super Bowls.
I'm just saying that, like, I think it deserves credit to reach the pinnacle twice.
Well, here's why, it bothers me when quarterbacks are given all the credit for winning Super Bowls. And the Giants are the best example of that, probably, in the modern era. Because if you look at both of those two individual games, the stars of the game, both of those wins, were the Giants' defensive line. Guys like Strahan and Justin Tuck dominated, made Tom Brady very uncomfortable. Justin Tuck, the one year, was just phenomenal. They won the Super Bowl. That's the reason they won it. Eli made some big plays. Eli played well. I'm not trying to, but the Giants' defensive line is how they came. And you go to Tom Brady with all, and I say it all the time, Tom's Tom, right? He's got all the Super Bowl rings, all the winning, greatest of all time, and I agree with that. His best team, he didn't even win. His best team was the one that lost to the Giants. Yeah. That was his best team. There's a lot of things that go into winning Super Bowls.
No, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that.
And I'm not saying this guy's a Hall of Fame player because he won 2 Super Bowls. He was a good quarterback. His brother, ironically, he had 2 for many years, and Peyton only had 1. And you had some morons that would say, "Oh, he's got 2 and Peyton's got 1." They're not even in the same stratosphere as quarterbacks. And the ironic thing about that, Zander, is Peyton was shitty when he won his second. He was terrible. He was at the end of his career. He could barely throw. He had the nerve issue.
Was that in Denver when he had that?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was terrible. And the best example of that is John Elway. When John Elway was losing Super Bowls, he was phenomenal. When he was winning, he was okay. It was Terrell Davis's team. A different era. They were run first, and that's how they built the team. But it all gets lost in the fog of when careers end, the context of individual games. Ben's got 2. Ben Roethlisberger, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He is a Hall of Fame quarterback. But his first Super Bowl win, he was an abject disaster in the game that he won.
Many say that about Mahomes' his first Super Bowl too, where he wasn't
good. Yeah. Well, that's true as well. He wasn't that good against the Eagles, to be honest.
No. Well, I mean, he was.
Well, he made big plays, but he threw for 180, whatever.
182
yards, whatever.
Well, he got it done when he needed to get it done, and obviously we didn't win the game.
Yeah. Well, he made the plays when he needed to make the plays.
The plays he needed to make the plays. But let's get to our commercial break. We went a little long there. We'll have BLG coming up in about 5 minutes. This will be our last time out before BLG. Good conversation there. Good stuff with Mike Gill as well. A lot of linebacker talk today, Johnny Mac. A lot of linebacker talk in the first hour of the show. So if you're concerned about that position and you're just joining the show, make sure you go back and listen to hour number 1. Thanks everybody for being here. A lot of good chats, a lot of good comments, a lot of good people here joining us on Birds 365. So we appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure you guys like the show, and we'll be right back on Birds 365. BLG coming up next.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your greenhouse? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Just 6 days to go until the Philadelphia Eagles report to training camp. The stakes are high on the 2024 season. A lot of questions to be answered, a lot of things to watch as we go down to training camp. John, any idea what it's going to look like for you next week with camp? I know you haven't gotten the schedule yet or anything, but we expecting all the players to talk. You know, what kind of practice schedule are they on? Is it a 1 a day, 2 a day? Obviously, no 2 a days. I know that. I'm just asking. You know, the structure of the day. How's it going to go down there next week?
It's going to be early in the morning. Always trying to beat the heat, and in the summer for training camp. So generally, training camp practices are very early. And then they ship to regular season mode, which is more in the afternoon when preparation training camp is over. So from that standpoint, it's pretty concrete. We're just waiting for the confirmation of days and things like that. But going to be a little bit more. Nick mentioned that. I think, the Eagles made a little bit of an adjustment, at least as far as coming off the collapse. And, it gave the opportunity for the coaches to say, look, we need a little bit more time, because the Eagles have been sort of in that forefront since really the pandemic of less is more. So you're going to see a little bit more when it comes to practice. Maybe a little bit longer, not crazy, but the Eagles were, and that was awesome, by the way. They're short practices, but they're going to be, and that's just the pendulum effect of the NFL, and the fact that when something goes bad, you go the other direction. That's just human nature that goes far outside the NFL. And then you have new coordinators, so you want to give those guys a little bit more time to get people up to speed. For Vic, it's going to be a little bit easier because they've been running his scheme for three years now. So it's going to be a little bit easier than for Kellen Moore. And you kind of saw that in the spring where the defense was ahead of the offense, and it typically is in the NFL, but I expect that to be the case early in training camp as well. And that's probably going to be a story because the Eagles offense is supposed to be good, really good. And the Eagles defense, as we've been talking about, is kind of a lot of question marks, a lot of optimism for certain positions, young corners, all that kind of stuff. But overall, obviously, the Eagles offense is supposed to be better than the defense. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case early in the process.
Let's see. We'll talk about it all next week when the Eagles report to training camp. Let's go to our friend now, BLG, Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation, joining us now on Birds 365, back from Vermont. BLG, how you doing, man? How was your vacation?
It was good. Doing well. Excited for Eagles training camp practice that we'll be at in 1 week.
Yeah, Vermont's one of the few states I haven't been to, BLG. Unfortunately, there's, I've done so much traveling over the years for sports. Obviously, they don't have a sports team, so I'm not going for that reason. I haven't checked out the fall foliage yet, but I only hear good things. So I hope you had a good time. It's good to see you back. Hopefully you're well rested and charged up. We were talking a lot about Hard Knocks. It's a thing. I don't know if you've been watching. HBO kind of okey doked everybody with this teaser that I said, calm down, because I talked to a bunch of Giants people, and now we have the full understanding of what went down with Saquon Barkley. Boy, I don't know about you, but what I get from that show is Eagles fans should be thrilled to have an owner like Jeffrey Lurie and not an owner like John Mara, who, best I can tell, is just a really rich fan, BLG.
And a co-owner at that too, right? With Tish there, which is kind of like a, maybe not the best dynamic in terms of, I think part of the Giants' problem over the past, I don't know, decade or so is that they're not always pulling in the same direction at that level with like conflicting interests at the top there. The Saquon thing has like obviously dominated this series. Yeah. Which is kind of just like, if you're the Giants organization, like they can't be thrilled about this, right? This is such a weird kind of look inside their building.
I think that's the other part, BLG. I think no team is going to want to do this show.
Yeah.
Especially, can you imagine Eagles fans hearing honest conversations about Hassan Reddick this offseason or Jalen Hurts and previously? I mean, it would not go over well.
No, not at all. And I can't see Howie Roseman wanting that, Jeffrey Lurie wanting that. So I wonder if this is a one and done kind of thing after the Giants' appearance on here.
Yeah, definitely going to pull back. I mean, Giants lose one guy, and it's the whole series is about the guy they lost rather than everything else they're trying to do. You're right, BLG. It's kind of a kick in the face that everybody's continuing to talk about the one thing they're probably trying to move on from, which is funny. But, BLG, we talked. We opened the show today. We did a lot of talk about the linebacker. John's doing his previews over on SI.com for each position group. Boy, the linebacker is an ugly thing to preview, BLG. There's not a lot of talent in the room. Can they overcome the talent at linebacker position this year with Vic Fangio? How good can this defense be despite the lack of talent at linebacker?
Yeah, this is like a yearly storyline for the Eagles, right?
Yeah, it is.
Can they get by? I like Devin White from what we saw out of him early in training camp. Now, obviously, coming off of a bad year. He was benched, basically. He wasn't even playing too much in that Lions playoff game at the end of the season. So hardly considering him a sure thing. But, when you look at his pedigree, when you look at what he did in spring practices, which is a small sample, and if he can build on that in training camp, it's obviously a much more encouraging sign. But, I'm intrigued by Devin White, want to see what he has in this system. Should be healthier, I guess, than he was a year ago when he kind of had that injury kind of hampering him all season long, assuming he can stay healthy. So not to say he's the savior of the position, he magically fixes everything. But, I think there's something there. And then after that, I don't know. I don't know if Zach Bond can truly, be a good starter. I don't know if Nakobe Dean can factor in after Devin White. I just don't know.
I'm going to swing for the fences here, BLG at linebacker, and that's Ben VanSumeren. And hear me out. People talk about the athleticism of Devin White, which is true. Phenomenal athlete, certainly the best from an athletic standpoint, the best linebacker the Eagles have had in a very long time. Hasn't translated on the field in Tampa Bay over a very large sample size with a very good defensive mind leading him in Todd Bowles. And one of the things that soured me even more, BLG, was how Devin talked about Todd Bowles. He loves him. He called him a father figure. He still checks in. Todd Bowles checks in to make sure he's okay. So I'm like, this is like the perfect ecosystem for Devin White in Tampa Bay, and it didn't work. So in a weird way, that kind of soured me. Ben VanSumeren has similar traits. If you just look at the athleticism, he didn't play in college, basically. He's unbelievable from an athlete. The 4.4 guy, his explosion numbers, his vertical leap is like 42.5. His broad jump is 11 feet. He's outrageous. And he doesn't have any bad habits that you have to fix. This is where Vic's got to show up. Make this guy a player, Vic Fangio. Ben VanSumeren.
Okay. I like Ben VanSumeren.
Okay.
I thought he showed some things late last year.
I like that reaction. Okay.
Yeah, me too.
I like Ben VanSumeren. I mean, that's the thing. Like when it comes to linebacker, I think you're hitting on it, John. Like you're rooting for the long shots there, in terms of like if that position is going to be solidified. I like Brandon Smith. I thought, he's like their biggest linebacker, just frame wise. And he was running with the second team a little bit there with Nakobe Dean in the spring practices. So kind of interested to see if he can do anything. But when you're banking on these kind of guys, the guy that a lot of fans probably don't even know is on the team.
Yeah, that's what we got to comment that. Who the hell is Ben VanSumeren?
Yeah.
And I get it. And it's very unlikely, but I'm just looking for optimistic paths. And I think he's one. And I think, Nakobe's the biggest one. I still think Nakobe's the biggest one. If he can stay healthy, he's got good instincts. He's not the best athlete in the world for an NFL player, but I think he can play the position if he ever stays healthy. I think it's a bad sign if Nakobe Dean is not the Eagles' best linebacker in 2024. You seem to be leaning towards more Devin. And I think ultimately, Brandon, they want those two guys to be the starters. Who's got the green dot if those two guys are the starters?
I mean, I think it would be Nakobe based on the past, but I think again, a relatively perfect world, obviously in a perfect world, then Devin White and Nakobe Dean are both all pros, but in a relatively realistic kind of projection here, I think Nakobe Dean is a guy who can kind of be more of a stabilizing force for them and solid. And Devin White is the guy who he's probably going to give up some plays. He might make some big plays too, as in coverage, blitzing, but he also might give up some. I think that's kind of that dynamic there. They have one guy who's more of like the solid and steady, and the other guy who's more of the variance guy. I think that's kind of how they're looking at it.
Yeah, that's a good take. I mean, I think Nakobe has more of that instinctual linebacker feel, so I definitely agree with you there. BLG, let me zoom out and ask you to zoom in. We're 6 days out from them reporting, 7 days out, as you discussed, until they're on the practice field. Where's your head as we approach training camp? Like, what's the top thing you're looking at when you get down there at the NovaCare? What's on BLG's mind for the Eagles in 2024 as you approach training camp?
Yeah, just keep it simple and look at the quarterback, right? I mean, especially coming off.
Can't go wrong there.
The spring, and also the last time we heard him talk. I mean, I'm sure that's going to come up. There's comments about Nick Sirianni. I'm sure that'll be addressed not only by Nick Sirianni himself, but also Jalen Hurts after practice. So a lot to monitor off the field as well as on the field. Does Jalen Hurts look more comfortable than he did in the spring practices last year, going into training camp, especially coming off of the entering 2022. I thought, obviously there was a lot of eyes on Jalen Hurts and a lot of pressure. And is he the guy every day in training camp, monitoring super closely? Last year, it was, to me, it felt like, okay, he proved it. Played awesome all year. It's great in the Super Bowl. Don't really need to wonder if he's the guy, monitor him as closely. This year, it's back to you need to watch really closely and watch. I want to see every single pass and see how he's adjusting to this offense.
I often bring up, really, if you boil it down, the Eagles offense from 2023 and 2022 is pretty similar if you take out the turnovers. But from that, there's such a variance with that, and other people are involved. It could be a tip ball, it could be a failed mesh point thing. So that's not all on Jalen Hurts, but he's obviously got to be more ball security conscious, and I think he will be. But my biggest concern, and you brought this up on the show before, BLG, so I'll give you credit, is how long it took him to get rid of the football last year, which is he was in Justin Fields levels. And I remember being in that Eagles game in Chicago where Jalen got hurt. But I remember looking at Justin Fields going, you need a sundial to measure this guy getting rid of the football. Just couldn't make a decision. Jalen's got to get better at that. But I think it's got to be organic. I don't think it could be, Doug Nussmeier mentioned 2.3 seconds. He's never going to be at 2.3 seconds. But it can't be get rid of the football, dump it off. It's got to be organic. That's a difficult tightrope for Kellen Moore, don't you think?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's not about being at 2.3 where, I think Tua, you're talking about Tua Tagovailoa at that point at the top of the league. And he's going to hold it longer than a lot of quarterbacks just because of his mobility. There's some of that is baked in. He doesn't need to be the fastest, but I always point out, in 2022, he was at 2.8 seconds instead of the 3.3 or whatever he was last year. That half of a second is an eternity in the NFL. If you can kind of get him closer, maybe to 3 even, I think that's kind of something you would like to see overall. And I think part of it's, the intermediate game. I don't think we've seen enough consistency there. We know what Jalen Hurts can air it out deep. I don't think that there's a question there. And I think at times, he can really get it out fast if that's the intention of the play. But I think kind of working the intermediate game, that's something especially I don't think we really saw in spring practices. I mean, he had a lot of completions of 8 yards, 5 to under 10 yards. I like to see him work the middle of the field, which has been a weakness for him over his career. And I like to see him work that intermediate game.
Yeah, he doesn't seem comfortable throwing it in the middle of the field. Because I was kind of shocked because Aaron Schatz and Mike Tanier's, the old Football Outsiders guys, I forget what it's called now, but they do a great job. And a bunch of interesting nuggets. And one was the Eagles were last in the NFL throwing the football over the middle of the field. That kind of checks.
Mm-hmm.
But they were really effective when they did it. They were fourth in the league. And I think he's just really uncomfortable doing it. And I bring that up because there was a lot of that, and sometimes it was ugly in the spring. But I think that's good coaching. If Kellen Moore's trying to force him to do something, as long as you're not getting to week one and saying, all right, you got to throw it over the middle of the field. Hopefully he evolves naturally. I think that's how you have to approach it.
I mean, we saw progress in that area, from 2021 to 2022 when they got A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was supposed to be the answer to that. Okay, it kind of unlocked the middle of the field for Jalen Hurts that year. And then obviously we saw regression in that regard. And it is funny, that they're so effective at it. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, once you get the ball in A.J. Brown's hands over the middle of the field, hey, he can make more yardage happen himself. And it doesn't have to all be on the quarterback at that point. So, it would be good to see them kind of improve that area.
What's your expectation for the changes Kellen Moore is going to bring to this offense, BLG? Not that different of an offense than it was last year, right? I mean, you're bringing back most of the same guys. You added Saquon Barkley, but everything else is the same, and you lose Jason Kelsey, obviously, which is a big one there. But, what kind of changes does Kellen Moore bring? I think it's good for the intermediate game. I think he's a guy that likes to spread the ball around. How do you see Kellen Moore fitting in this offense?
I mean, it depends who you ask. Jalen say it's 95% new, so a lot more different according to him. I mean, that's the big question, right? How is it going to look? How different is it going to be? How much, do they retain from what they have been doing in the past? As Nick Sirianni said, they don't want to scrap everything they've been doing entirely. I think we're going to see twist. Obviously, we're going to see more motion than probably none at all. But, I think a big thing on my mind entering training camp and about the team as a whole is just how much of some of the things that we've seen over the past couple of years, how much of that is truly Nick Sirianni, Brian Johnson, Shane Steichen, how much of that is their interpretation of what Jalen Hurts likes to do, and making him feel comfortable. So and that'll be a really interesting test case this year if there are certain things that are still not present, such as maybe throws over the middle or running back targets. Well, then it's clear to me at that point that it's not just a coordinator kind of thing, it's also a quarterback kind of thing. So I think that's really going to be interesting to see.
How much pressure do you think Kellen Moore has? Because boy, I look at the numbers last year and they weren't acceptable, and they weren't acceptable understandably during the collapse. But I think if you go back in the moment, even at the bye week or when they were 10-1, like everybody was complaining, BLG, the style points weren't there. And everybody's like, oh, this what's wrong with this offense? And meanwhile, they're number 3 in third down offense, number 1 in fourth down, top 10 in red zone, good in situational football, but it didn't look good. It wasn't aesthetic. He's not only got to be effective, there's got to be a beauty to it. How much pressure is on Kellen Moore?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, ire and criticism came from the talent was good. It was really, really good. And I think it was hard to argue that the coaching staff was getting the most or even more out of the talent that they had, which is, I think, kind of an oversimplified way to look at good coaching, getting more out of the talent that you have. So I think the pressure is extremely high on Kellen Moore because, by contrast, like with Vic Fangio, the way I'll put it, I don't think the Eagles are hiring Vic Fangio because they're saying we need to have the best or like a top 5 defense in the NFL. I don't think that's the realistic expectation. If that happens, obviously they're going to take it. I'm not saying they're not shooting for that, but I think more realistically, they will settle for, okay, competency, not totally falling apart like they did at the end of last year. Whereas the bar for the offense and how Jeffrey Lurie feels about that side of the ball too, ultimately, at the end of the day, that bar is really high. And they need to be an elite level offense. They need to be dominant. So I think there's a ton of pressure on Kellen Moore to not only get the results, but also, navigate this situation that he's in where the quarterback clearly, there's an adjustment there. And he certainly seems to feel a certain way about a new offense. And then just the dynamic with a head coach who previously liked to have a lot of offensive control and now doesn't have that anymore. So not only is he tasked with getting these high level results, but he's also kind of has to navigate like the politics of it as well.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing. I mean, and he has pressure, as you just pointed out, BLG, in Philly, but he also has pressure personally. Like he has everything he needs coming here to take over this offense. If he fails with this offense, it's not going to be a great sign for him. 3 teams in 3 years, and you couldn't get this offense going. So from a personal perspective, Kellen definitely has some pressure there as well. BLG, one thing I want to bring up, because, I asked you what you're thinking about coming into the season, and you said Jalen Hurts, and I'm right there with you. I mean, we go as far as he takes us. But I have a new fear about Jalen Hurts that I've been thinking about the last couple of days. Is his shelf life shorter than we had anticipated when we signed him? And what I mean by that is, me and John constantly talk about, we don't want to change Jalen Hurts. We don't want to turn him into Brock Purdy. We want to use him, for what he has. Are we ever going to see the guy we saw in 2022 again, that explosive, dynamic playmaker that could use his legs, use his arm? And that's what I mean when I say, is the shelf life shorter than we anticipated? Any thoughts on that, just on where we are with him and how long, he's going to be able to play like he plays?
I can't say we'll never see that guy again because he's only 25, going to be going on 26 here in like early August or so. Yeah. So, still pretty young, relatively young into his NFL career, at least the way quarterbacks are playing, late into their careers these days. So, you look at the kind of year that Dak Prescott had last year's first kind of like, MVP caliber kind of season that didn't happen for him until a little bit later in his career, at least relative to Jalen Hurts. So, I still think there's room to improve, room to rebound, but I think 2022 was so special in so many ways, not only him, but also the, supporting cast and the health and all those kind of factors going on, that it's just going to be kind of hard to recreate that exactly. So, I think that, this was also talked about in those ESPN Jeremy Fowler rankings that came out this week. A lot of NFL insiders believe, a healthier Jalen Hurts this year will make a difference. And I believe in that too. But of course, he needs to stay healthy. And that's a big question.
And that's
mark.
part of my worry. It's the physical stuff. You know, this
And
is the NFL. This isn't college, man. Like, he's getting beat around. That's where I'm like, look, I don't know if he's going to ever be able to play like he did, you know, with staying healthy.
And then it's a concern if he is able to play, but not at 100%, and then he's not that full force player, and that limits his game, and then you're kind of a compromised quarterback at that point.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about Vic. We talked about Kellen in a lot of ways, and we talked about it with the linebackers. In a lot of ways, I get the feeling it's like, all right, we got this supercharged offense. We bring in Saquon Barkley to make it even better. Still got a top 5 offensive line, playmakers all over the place. Jalen Hurts is healthier. Everything's set up on offense and defense. It's like, yeah, Vic will figure it out. And I think it might be leaning towards too much. Vic will figure it out. Is that the feeling you get with this defense, or do you see a higher upside? Who was that guest we had, Zander, who just went down the litany of questions about this? There's
Bill
questions
Colarulo
all over the place.
Yeah, Bill Colarulo.
Yeah, it was Bill.
Last week, though, John. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Bryce Huff. I'm tremendously high on Bryce Huff. I think Bryce Huff is going to be, but it's all projection. It's all projection. Josh Sweat. Is he going to bounce back? Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, conditioning. All the young corners, the linebackers, even the safeties. CJ barely played last year.
Yeah.
Reed Blankenship might be the most concrete player on this team. You know what he's going to be. Is it too much? Vic will figure it out.
I think when you look at his track record, I think you feel better than you do worse about it. But again, I think like it's not the expectation that Vic Fangio is coming in here and making it an elite defense. Like, it's a sure thing. And I think that one would be remiss to have that be the expectation. I think, again, the expectation, and now this is too low of a bar, but it should be like, it's not going to be pathetic of a joke as it was when Matt Patricia took it over in the middle of last season. I think that's kind of, realistically, again, what they're trying to hope to avoid, that there might even, there might be rough patches, but I think they're also hoping that, they can do enough with the talent that they have to make it work and not be, this liability, the downfall of the team entirely. It might not be the strength of the team. I think they're kind of going into the season like eyes wide open about that. There are situations where, things click and the defense is maybe a lot better than anyone could reasonably expect it to be. Sure. But again, I think they're kind of just trying to raise the floor of that unit and prevent it from being a total disaster that sinks the offense.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, there are a lot of questions on the defense, and I asked this question yesterday. I'll ask you, BLG. September 6th is here, or is it the 5th? September 6th is here. Who's the starting corner opposite Darius Slay on week 1?
Yeah, I'm going with Isaiah Rodgers. I'm leaning into it. The way he moved when I saw him in spring practices was really impressive to me. I look at how this coaching staff as a whole, and obviously Vic Fangio is a new factor, but I think there could be some bias towards the veteran player. We saw that in terms of who was getting the first team reps at corner. It was originally Isaiah Rodgers and those spring drills. It's going to be a fierce competition. I fully acknowledge that. I don't think it's going to be like Isaiah Rodgers by far and away. It could be by a very slim margin. But I look at his experience. I look at his movement ability, his ball skills and everything. And I think that's just a player that you want on the field out there.
I'm going with Quinyon from the perspective of, that's where they want to go. Ultimately that's the end game. B, I look at Kansas City a couple years ago, and when they played all those young defensive backs, it was kind of ugly early for them, BLG. People forget. And then as they got down the stretch, they got over those Jim Schwartz coin startup costs, and all of a sudden, they got some good young defensive backs. I think Vic's going to throw Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and say, let's go, man. Let's get him over with. And it might be ugly at times, but I think that's the way they should go, and I think it's the way they're going to go. Unless they have terrible summers, which I don't expect, because they both look good. All the young corners look good. Kaylee looked good. But Rodgers was the best player of the spring. in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But they want to get the Quignon. He's got the higher ceiling. Why not get those startup costs over?
I would agree in terms of like what they should do. And I think it's clearly been a detriment of this coaching staff, and to the point where Howie Roseman acknowledged basically as much they need the young guys to play. Of course, not too long after Howie Roseman said at the combine, Nick Sirianni talked about needing to win each week and kind of directly contradicted what Howie had to say. So, I have to see it totally before I believe it when it comes to playing the young players. But I think no matter who starts at cornerback too, I think let's say it is Rodgers for the sake of this discussion. I think Quignon's still going to be on the field. We saw that in the spring where there was certain packages where
playing dime linebacker.
Exactly.
I always joke about that. If Sean decided that we'd be burning down the city, and Vic does it, and it's like, all right, let's roll.
That's right.
Yeah, it's amazing the difference in the cachet between the two. But yeah, the standpoint of his ability to do things like that, I think it's a luxury that is real, and I think it's going to help the Eagles. The embargo session we had with Nick Sirianni was lifted, and you saw about 1 million stories. What's the biggest story with Nick Sirianni and this ship to you, PLG?
I think it's the continued discourse on his role with the team, what was responsibility. I thought the word selflessness was interesting to come up there.
That was mine. That was my question. PLG.
Yeah. Well, good question. And I mean, selflessness is a very generous portrayal.
Yeah,
I think,
it is. Like, look at me, I'm selfless.
It just, he wanted to do it, right? Nick Sirianni was the one who came to Jeffrey Lurie after this past season, was like, you know what? I think I should give up some of the offensive control just for the good of the team. That was kind of interesting framing to me. But yeah, I think, but honestly, to give Nick credit here too, kind of ripping on him a little bit there. I think he's eyes wide open about the situation. He knows. He admitted it. He said, if we're not winning games, I could be gone. So I think he realizes the pressure, and if how he responds to that is obviously going to be what determines his future here.
Yeah, I was kind of impressed by it because, to be honest, look, if he walks in after that collapse and Doug Peterson's things, he's out. So I think there were two options for him: either own it or be forced to do it. And he decided to own it, which I think is a smart way to go about it. I think it's the politically savvy way is how I described it, to go about it. Make the best of a bad situation, which I give him credit. I think he did. I think he took the right path. Do you think there was another path, or that was it?
I think having that Doug situation, I'm sure he wasn't here for that directly, but I'm sure that
he learned something from it.
Yeah. I'm sure he's aware of that because, at least I'm sure that's been brought to his attention, and to have that, experience to kind of contrast to his, I think that was extremely valuable for him in the situation that he was in. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really think there was a great other way for him to go about it than the way that it's played out.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way it might insulate him. I mean, he's now given up, because even before when Shane was calling plays and Brian Johnson, remember, he had the quote, it doesn't matter if it's Howie Roseman or Jeffrey Lurie, it's my offense. Now it's not his offense. So if we come out of the gate and we're sputtering or we're struggling to get it going a little bit, he almost insulated himself in terms of, you kept Nick for the year. Now you're going to have to see it through for the whole year. Now, if they stink at the end of the year, he's going to be gone. But my point is, if we come out slow, I don't know if you're going to be able to really blame Nick Sirianni like you would have,
they can blame him. They'll blame him. They'll blame him.
They'll blame Kellen Moore too.
Well, I don't know, because Nick is the one. I think Kellen will get the benefit of the doubts, at least early, but versus Nick. I mean, people are going to be upset if
if they're going to move on from Nick, because if they start slow, I mean, shit, you should have just fired him then last year. Why not? You know what I mean? You got now that now you got to lay in it.
I've been very honest about that. I think Jeffrey straddled the fence. I think, you make a decision. You either fire the guy or you give him a mulligan, and it's your team. You do what you want. I don't like the straddling of the fence, but we'll see how it works out. At Brandon Gouton, make sure you follow BLG on X, Twitter, Bleeding Green Nation. Tremendous site. You should go there every morning to get your latest Eagles news. Brandon does a tremendous job keeping everything up to date. And I hope you had a good vacation, buddy. I hope you're rested and ready to go, because we got more practice time, supposedly.
That's right.
Maybe we'll get a schedule even someday.
We'll see. That might be pushing it.
Yeah, that's too lofty there, Johnny Mac. All right, BLG, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, bud.
BLG joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from BLG. As always, sights set on the quarterback, Johnny Mac. I like it because BLG brings us back to reality. The quarterback is the main position here in the NFL, and it matters what our quarterback does this year. Let's take one more time out, Johnny Mac. We missed that one in the middle, and then we will wrap up this Wednesday edition. Moving right along, man. We are almost down to 5 days now after Birds 365 ends. That's how I view my days almost. When Birds is over, it's like on to the next day. I know it's early, but 6 days until they report to camp, so it's right around the corner. Let's take a commercial timeout. We'll come back and close out this Wednesday edition of Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Wednesday edition, wrapping up here. Just 5 minutes left to go. Good show today. Heavy linebacker talk today. A lot of off-ball linebacker talk that me and Johnny Mac did. We ran through his preview in hour number 1. Then we talked with Mike Gill and Brandon Leak out. And so good show today. Johnny Mac, what's on your mind as we close out this Wednesday edition? A lot of linebacker talk, some Jalen Hurts talk, some Nick Sirianni talk. What stood out to you?
Yeah, a lot of linebacker talk, and that's unfortunately sticks out. So hopefully we can turn the page on the linebackers. I almost think we'll leave it with some optimism. I don't think it could be as bad as it looks on paper. I think somebody will jump up and play a little bit better than expected, whether it's Nakobe staying healthy for the first time and playing significant snaps. He was healthy in his rookie season, but he didn't play significant snaps. Devin White, hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully he turns the corner and the light bulb comes on, and that athleticism turns into something special. Finally, or maybe it is a Ben VanSumeren or even a Jeremiah Trotter Jr. later in the season after he learns a little bit. It almost has to be better than it looks. So, if you look at it from that way, hey, there's some optimism.
There you go. I mean, I'll take it. I think Jeremiah could be all right. I mean, I think he's not this year, but I do think I like the instinctual part of it. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, I don't know. I don't know how much it's going to matter this year, but I'm losing a little bit of faith in defense. The more we talk about it, I'm like, Vic Fangio, he's going to be great, but like, he can't play. He can't do all the other. He's not God.
He's not playing.
Yeah,
no.
He's not.
I call him the Greek god of defense, and then Mark Farzetta says he's Italian. Yeah, I get it, but there's no Italian gods that I know of. Yeah, he can't do it by himself. And there's just, the question marks, and they go beyond, obviously, linebackers, but they're all over the place. And if anything, when you have that many questions, they're all not going to end positively. That's just the nature of this league.
Yeah.
And, from the, is Bryce Hupp going to take that next step? I think so. But it's a projection. The conditioning with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, can they play? Can Josh Sweat bounce back? Today I'm doing the corners on Eagles on SI. By the way, they've rebranded. It's Eagles on SI now. There's 14 stinking cornerbacks, many of them young and talented, all projection. Even Isaiah Rodgers, Kaylee Ringo, all projection. The safeties, CJ, played 3-4 games last year. Has his own history of injuries. A lot of question marks on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, we'll see how it all goes. Good show today on Birds 365. We'll tap back in tomorrow. John, any preview for what's coming today on the training camp previews? Any?
The cornerbacks, 14 of them, 14 deep. It's ridiculous.
14 deep cornerbacks, man. It's a busy room.
If you want to count James Bradbury, which
we got to count James Bradbury. He's on the roster, and he's certainly not a damn safety.
Well, I think they're going to play him at safety. But if you count Bradbury, that's 14 corners on the roster. I think it's 14. I got to factor in Perry Nickerson. I think he was 14th. Might be 15. I'll double check that.
Good show today, Johnny Mac. Thanks for doing it. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks, our friends in the chat, Mike Fittery, Joey B., Eduardo, Big William, Brad Wright, who's out here calling me all sorts of names. I guess he didn't like something that I said. All good, love you, Brad. Appreciate everybody being here.
That escalated quickly. What did Zander say?
I don't know. He called me a racist. I'm like, oh, there's that iconic word where you just bring it out. Anytime somebody doesn't say something you might not like, you hurl out accusations and insults at them.
I didn't hear any racist comments from Zander. I must have missed that.
Yeah, no, not from me. That you never would hear that from me. So appreciate anybody. Appreciate everybody for being here. We appreciate the likes, the support, the comments all off season long. It's been a great off season, but boy, am I ready to get to the season. My first off season, obviously, here being the host on Birds 365. So appreciate you, Johnny Mac. Good show today, man. We'll catch you tomorrow. All right, brother.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Hit the like button on your way out, and we will see you tomorrow on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.